is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hey Hoopheads, wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. We've had their partnership manager and training specialist Jefferson Mason and marketing manager Nick Bartlett on the show in the past, and we couldn't be more excited about what they're doing for the game of basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market, and truly accelerate skill development faster than ever. Beyond efficient reps, Dr. Dish provides training expertise and versatility designed to develop complete players. The new Dr. Dish CT machine has further revolutionized basketball training with over 150 plus on-demand individual and team workouts from some of the best coaches and trainers in the game. These workouts include video instruction and combine game-like shooting drills with ball handling, conditioning, and agility drills. Along with workouts, the Dr. Dish training management system also provides stat tracking and analytics to track progress and ensure accountability. These are just a few reasons why top programs like Duke, North Carolina, Louisville, Florida, Baylor, and countless others are upgrading to Dr. Dish. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com. Follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And make sure you mention the Hoopheads podcast to get $300 off your next Dr. Dish purchase. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get out and get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
You have to be firm in your beliefs, but you also have to be willing to take an honest look in the mirror and realize, okay, just because I thought this was the right thing and I've been planning for this for 2 or 3 years, it doesn't necessarily mean it fits in this exact situation.
Matt Vespa is entering his first year on the Lakeland Community College men's basketball coaching staff and his first year coaching basketball at the collegiate level. Previously, Vespa was the head coach at Kenston High School in the state of Ohio and held an overall record of 44-27 during his 3 years leading the program. During his time at Kenston, Vespa helped guide several players to playing college basketball at Walsh University, Notre College, and Baldwin Wallace University. Before his time at Kenston, Vespa led the Geneva Eagles for 2 seasons, helping the team set a record for single-season wins in the last 10 years. Prior to his coaching career, Vespa was an all-conference and all-academic player at Eastlake North High School in the state of Ohio. After high school, Vespa played at Lake Erie College under Coach Cliff Hunt. Vespa was part of 2 Allegheny Mountain Collegiate Conference championship teams and participated in 2 NCAA Division III national tournaments. Vespa is a USA Basketball certified coach, and he has been featured in basketball clinics internationally. Check out our website, hoopheadspod.com, where you can listen to every episode in our archive. After you've listened to this episode or one of your other favorites, please head over to your favorite podcast app and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Those reviews help others in the basketball community find our show. Make sure you're subscribed to the Hoopheads podcast so you never miss an episode. The pod is available on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, and YouTube. Get out your notebook right now so you don't miss any of the wisdom shared by Matt Vespa, assistant men's basketball coach at Lakeland Community College in the state of Ohio. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel, and tonight we are pleased to welcome to the podcast from Lakeland Community College, assistant men's basketball coach Matt Vespa. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it.
Hey, we're excited to have you on, get a chance to talk to you about some of the interesting things you've been able to do in your coaching career thus far and talk a little hoops with you. So let's go back in time to start off and talk about how you got into the game of basketball when you were a young kid. What made you fall in love with the game?
That's pretty easy for me. It was definitely my dad. He was a basketball junkie. Played basketball in college. They're from Pennsylvania, so he played at University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown. And it was just something, he seemed to like it, so I think he liked it. It seemed cool, so I thought I would try it, and I just immediately fell in love with it. I thought it was so cool that you could do it by yourself. You could do it with a group of people. You could do it, if it's raining outside, if it's snowing, you can go inside and do some dribbling drills. And I love the satisfaction of going and working on something and seeing the results. Every time you go to the court and, you maybe miss a couple shots, you could go work on it yourself and get back there and just, if you put the time in it, to me it was fair. It was one of the few things in life that was fair, that if you worked hard at it, you would get better. It didn't matter. No one else really had a say in it. Just if it was important to you and you worked hard at it, you got it. So I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing about basketball is there's always a measuring stick. Obviously, there's a lot more to the game than putting the ball through the basket, as we know. But when you're a kid, it's easy to measure your progress with how many times that ball is going through the net.
For sure, yeah. Like I said, I'm not a big math guy or stats guy, but that was something I always like to keep account of and see, and just improve. And then I always like the thought of there's somebody else out there that's working harder than me or doing this, or they're getting better and I'm not. And I kind of liked having that in the back of my mind, and just I think it was the old and one T-shirt. You remember? Not and no, it was above the rim. Reebok above the rim had the shirt that said somewhere someone's practicing right now and you're not, and when you meet them in competition, they'll beat you. And I remember it was just a cheap T-shirt, but that kind of always stuck with me, and I like that. I like thinking that sooner or later I'm going to run into somebody and I put in more work than they did, and it's going to pay off. For
sure. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we might have to have Jason fact check us here. I think that quote originally was from Bill Bradley.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken,
I'll do some research.
All right, Jason's going to do some.
Got the crack research team on.
Our crack research team is going to get on that while we're talking, Matt. So we'll have an answer to that. I'm pretty sure it was Bill Bradley, but who knows? But it's definitely something that.
No, go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's shows you. Bill Bradley bring him up. I read his book when I think I was like 10 or 11 years old. I have no idea why. Anything I could get basketball wise, I wanted to know about. I wanted to learn. I thought. Having the history of it and being able to see those guys and kind of grow with them and learn and see how the game evolved was just another thing I just kind of fell in love with. So
who's your favorite player growing up?
My dad was a Celtics guy, so I grew up on the Larry Bird household. Still kind of my favorite. He's great. Pistol Pete, my dad actually worked his basketball camp when he was in college, so we grew up, hearing about Pistol Pete. Now I think. Nowadays with YouTube, people saw that, but back then you didn't get to see the clips. You didn't get to see all that little stuff. So we just heard stories about him and all the stuff he did and things like that. So love those older school guys. I think their game still kind of, both of those guys' games would translate well to today's game. So
yeah, I agree. I think I grew up kind of not liking Larry Bird, and I've grown over time to have a lot more respect for him. I think when I was a kid, what I liked was guys who could do things that I couldn't do. And so I saw Larry Bird. I'm like, man, I should be able to do some of those things. Like he can't really run. He can't really jump. He's just like me. And then I would see a guy like Jordan or Magic Johnson. I'm like, oh, those guys are different from me. And so I think those were the players that I gravitated towards. And I always hated the Celtics. So just for whatever reason. Then as I got older, I've obviously grown to have a tremendous amount of respect for Bird and what he was able to do and just his skill level. And then the Pistol Pete thing, I think back to when I was a kid, and he had those. I know he had the one video where he did all his stationary ball handling drills, and those are things that I grew up like. That was a staple of my life, probably from the time I was like 7 years old. I can remember going down to my basement and doing the figure eights and the around your back and the drop the ball behind your back and catch it, or the bounce it between your legs. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I was unable to find anything about Bill Bradley trait coming from him, but I did find out that he did Deflategate before Tom Brady. There's a good.
Oh, there you go.
All right. Well, you're gonna have to work harder because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to find it after the fact. We might have to just add it in once we find it. I'm pretty sure it's Bill Bradley. But anyway, it's. I think you go back and you look at Pistol Pete, and you mentioned about being able to see the highlights, and I think that's one of the things that kids today take for granted. Like I go back to when I was a kid, and you couldn't see anything, and I mean there was nothing out there if you wanted to go and watch a player and try to learn from a pro guy what watch footwork or things. Kids today have such a huge advantage in terms of being able to do that, and then just from an awareness standpoint of historical players, like even the Pistol Pete highlights that are out there, at least the ones that are the most common, you probably see like 10 of them that you see all the time. And if you want to find anything more, you got to really dig. You got to dig really deep. And I think Pistol and Wilt are the two guys that I wish there was more film of, so you could see exactly what those guys were when they're in their prime. Because a lot of the Wilt stuff that you see is when he was older with the Lakers, and there's not a lot of highlights from early '60s Wilt when he was putting up 50 a game. I mean, there's some out there, but most of it's grainy, and you can barely see it. And he's a guy that I would have loved to see. And then Pistol Pete, you think about, I don't know, I maybe have seen one or two clips of him when he was at LSU, and here the guy averaged 44 points a game without without a 3-pointer.
3-point line. Yeah. Someone went back and did the stats on that. I forget exactly what it is, but someone who had a lot more time than I did went back and watched all his games and kind of mapped out where his shots came from. And if he was shooting these when it didn't even matter that it was a 3-point line, he would have averaged, I think it was like 57 a game, they said.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, you hear the stories and you read some of the things about just things that both of those guys, Wilt and Pistol, that their contemporaries said about them, and just people were just amazed by their ability. But yeah, I think when you're a kid, you have your favorites and you look, and then you try to go out and you try to emulate what those guys do. And I think you made a great point about just being able to measure yourself against something and being able to see and mark your improvement. And for me, one of the things that I always liked about basketball, and I guess I'll ask you in this way, when you were a kid, let's say pre-middle school, pre-junior high, were you spending more time like playing with your buddies in the driveway, or were you spending more time by yourself dribbling the ball in your basement or just shooting on the driveway? Which one would you say was more descriptive of you?
Oh, by myself for sure at that point. I mean, I still, I would play in the city league and things like that and do that stuff, but I was out shooting by myself. Because it was just, we didn't have cell phones. I mean, I'm 35, but we didn't have a lot of phones. It was, you had to ride a bike to get somewhere and do all that stuff. It was harder. I wasn't playing AU. I wasn't doing any of that stuff. I just, we had a hoop up and I went and shot outside, and on the rare occasion it was nice and a couple of my friends got together, we'd go play some pickup, but that was it. I think, that's a huge difference now, guys. I don't know how many guys go play outside anymore.
Nobody does is the answer to that.
No. Yeah, you drive by the court and there's no one there. Every once in a while you'll see someone on a super nice day, but I think that's a huge thing, and I don't want to be the old guy that complains about back in my day, but I think that is definitely a huge difference. Is guys are way more skilled nowadays. I mean, we both know this. We've worked kids. There's kids that can do stuff that are 9, 10, 11 years old that I at my peak could never do handling the basketball. I mean, they have more moves than I could, but they have no idea how to actually play the game of basketball. They're trained and they drill and they do that stuff, and it's great. But how does it translate? Where we would go to the park and we'd play and we'd have to win, and if you didn't win, it might be an hour and a half till you played again. So it was kind of a big deal that you won the game. So you did whatever you had to do.
Yeah, I have said that numerous times on the podcast, and I feel bad for today's kids, and not to say that the system that we have today is bad, because there's positives to it. And you mentioned one of them is that kids are way more skilled, and I think kids get more. There's more kids that get more of an opportunity to play than there used to be. If you think about old outdoor basketball, I know when I was 13, 14 years old, I was probably the only 13 or 14-year-old that was at the parks where I was going to and getting a chance to play, whereas maybe the other kids my age were playing in their driveway or playing in the neighborhood, but they certainly weren't playing on the same courts that I was playing on. And now you look at it and nobody is playing outside, at least not anywhere that I've seen. And I think, to your point, it really makes a difference, one, in the fact of how competitive kids are and just learning how to play. I always tell people that when you walk into a gym, you can tell the difference between a kid who's playing basketball and a basketball player. And,
for sure.
And I felt like outdoor pickup basketball helped you develop as a basketball player. Whereas the skill development piece is great. It's a huge part of becoming a better player. But if all you do is skill development and play in games where your mom and dad are sitting in the stands and you have a coach and you have an official, you never really take any risks. You never really try anything new. You never really play against different levels of players where, like, one of the things I loved about pickup basketball is there's times where you're playing and you could be the best player on the court, and now I get to be Mr. Everything. And so I'm handling the ball and I'm distributing and I'm scoring and I can do all this, and I'm kind of the straw that stirs the drink. And then an hour later, some better players show up, and all of a sudden now I'm the 10th best player on the court. And so now I've got to fit into a role, and maybe I've got to play defense, or I've got to grab some rebounds, or I've got to pass the ball and figure out how to get my teammates who are better than me, get them opportunities. And I think that's something that kids just don't get, that opportunity. And then the other thing that I always feel sad about is just, for me personally, and I don't know how you feel about this, but for me personally, just that time of being at the court, if I look back on my childhood and early adulthood, those are some of the most cherished memories that I have in my entire life. that I just don't think you can duplicate in an organized basketball setting, because it's not only you're playing ball, but you're also hanging out.
Oh, for sure. I learned more being in those situations from older guys, and probably some words I shouldn't have learned at that point, or some different things, or just from being there. Like you said, I remember in the summer waking up early, riding my bike to the court, stopping and buying one of those big Dairyman's iced teas, and
Oh, yeah.
staying there all day and coming back, and your hands were completely black. That except not your palms, because the ball never touches your palms, which is a good one. But you're covering that stuff, and it's you said it. There's different roles there. I remember year to year, and we talked about progress and growing earlier. Going there when I was 11 or 12 and getting to play with the older guys, and maybe I play for 4 hours and I'd get 2 or 3 shots, and I better make those 2 or 3 shots. And the next year I go and I'm doing a little bit more, and the next year I'm getting older and older, to the point where I would show up and to me it was a huge deal. They'd be like, "Oh, Matt's here, he's pretty good. Like, we got him, he's on our team, or he's doing that." And just having that respect and kind of climbing that hierarchy, that was phenomenal to me. I mean, some of those moments at the courts rank up there with anything I've done in a high school game or a college game, of just being proud, like leaving and going, "Man, that was great." And I don't know if guys, I took a couple of our college players to play one day at the park, just messing around, and these guys were really good, and they were by far the best ones there. But they didn't care if they won or lost, and they're not bad guys, and they play hard and they compete hard. But to me, it was they had nothing to prove. I guess they thought. I thought every time I went up there, I had something to prove. I needed to. So the next time I showed up, people knew who I was and thought, "Oh, okay, he's pretty good." So I think it's just a difference in generations, and I don't necessarily know if one's better than the other, but it's definitely different.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I think if you transplanted us into today's system, there'd be things we'd like, and there'd be things we're like, "Ugh, man, I don't like this at all." And conversely, you take the kids that that we have today that are playing high school or college basketball right now, and you put them back into our environment, and they'd say, "Ooh, you're really going to play outside on cement and beat up your body that way and play?"
Yeah, and the one hoop's not even the one hoop's like 9'9", the other one's
right. It's all windy.
So we've talked. Yeah, I've talked a few times in the podcast that most summers we go and we play up at a local development, and they have a hoop that's 9.5 feet, and another hoop that's 10 feet, and the 9.5 foot hoop, the rim is bent because obviously people are dunking on that one, and they're not dunking on the 10-foot hoop. But it's also probably the same rim that was there when I was a kid, and they haven't replaced it. Yeah, we've broken it a few times and had to put the nuts and bolts, put new nuts and bolts on it to make it work.
But those are the things that I think are important. We used to play to 16. You got to switch at 8 because the one rim's bent.
Right, exactly.
So it wasn't fair to those are little things. But if you're willing to do that, you love playing basketball. You don't need to be inside. Oh, it's air conditioning, or it's this, or we didn't need people, at least personally, to say, "Okay, hey, I need you to make X amount of shots or do this or that." I don't know. To me, there was nothing else I wanted to do. I just wanted to go play basketball all day. So, like I said, I think there's guys now that are way better than we probably were at that age, just because of the coaching and the training and something as simple as, you can YouTube a move and you're like, "Hey, how do I do this?" Whereas someone would get me with the move and I'd be like, "Wow, that was pretty cool. I'm going to steal that." That's how we learned things. We couldn't just kind of watch stuff as easily as they do. So, there's good and there's bad about both.
Yeah, I like the idea that you could go on, and if I want to emulate something that I see from an NBA player or a college player today, I could do that so easily. And back in our time, you couldn't do that, and you had to learn more by, I think, experimentation, which again, there's good and bad to both of that. I think by experimentation, you put some things into your game that end up being somewhat unique to you. And yet at the same time, I think by being able to go out and copy some of the people who are the best in the world at what they do, you're going to add something and make it better for your game today. So there's good and bad to both systems. I think the bottom line for me, and you said it right off the top of this conversation, is that kids today are much more skilled. They just are. There's no question that there's more kids who can shoot the ball from three-point range, who can handle the ball really, really well, and you put them in an empty gym against some cones or just give them a ball and watch them go to work, and they look way, way better. And then conversely, I think guys from our era maybe are not quite as, or weren't quite as skilled as kids are today, but I think there was a greater understanding of the basketball IQ side of it. And so I guess the job for us as coaches then is how do we bridge, that gap for our current players to help them to develop their IQ and take advantage of those skills that they have, and that'll be a discussion as we move forward into more deeper into the podcast. So let's go back and talk a little bit more about you as a player. Talk a little bit about your high school career. Maybe give us just one or two of your favorite memories from playing high school basketball.
All right, so as a player, I guess if you asked me a couple years ago, I told you I was really good, and I thought I was pretty awesome. I guess the further away I get from it, the more comfortable I am to say that I was a solid basketball player. I worked hard at it. I played all the time. I could shoot the ball a little bit, and I loved it, and I knew what I was doing. So I was an above-average player. I would say I was pretty good early on. I had a couple ankle injuries that held me back a little bit, but all in all, I think for the most part, I kind of reached my potential of being a Division III basketball player. That's kind of where I was supposed to go. As far as memories going, winning a conference championship our senior year was huge. I know that was a big goal for us. And then sophomore year, we got to play. So I went to Eastlake North High School. We got to go to a scrimmage with St. X, and it was a really big deal because Jawad Williams was there. Jawad was going to North Carolina. We were super excited to go and play against a guy like that, and it was couldn't wait. There was another team there, St. Vincent St. Mary's, who had a freshman on there that no one cared about, but his name was LeBron James, and we had no idea who he was. We thought, hey, that kid's pretty good. And a couple years later, we just all laughed about it. We thought, like, and Jawad Williams, and he had a phenomenal career. He's a great player, but he was like the 10th or 11th guy in the Cavs, and LeBron's, the MVP of the league, and we were excited to play him in high school as opposed to that LeBron kid. So it was just kind of funny to have that experience as one of his probably first or second scrimmages, and his cousin Maverick Carter was probably the best player on that team. We thought that was a big deal, but we said he was going to be pretty good.
Was he dunking yet?
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was doing whatever he wanted, basically.
I think that was the scrimmage where actually when we had Flannery on, I think that was the same scrimmage that he talked about, where it was the first time that he saw LeBron, and then kind of had him in the back of his mind as things went forward, keeping an eye on him, and then eventually, I know there was the year when they had the Nike Hoop Summit. It was supposed to be just for seniors, and Flannery's like, hey, LeBron should be there, and so he said, that's how I take credit for discovering LeBron. So
he did. Like I said, we had no idea. We thought, that kid's pretty good, and then our coach said he's only a freshman. Like, man, he'll probably go play in college somewhere.
Right, exactly. Yep.
So yeah, those were kind of, I would say the keys. The big ones for me, and then going on to college at Lake Erie College, we get part of a really, really good. Like I said, I belonged at a Division III level, which is still really good basketball. That's not, to put it down at all. But we had a bunch of guys that didn't belong there that were probably Division I or Division II players. So we were pretty successful. We were able to win 2 conference championships. I think we finished 28-3 the one year. Made it to the Sweet 16, lost to John Carroll on a last-second shot to go to the Elite Eight. So I had a really fun college career. Learned a ton from Cliff Hunt, who was a coach at the time. But I think it was one of those things where, like I said, I recently realized I reached my max potential as a basketball player, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that's all you can ask for. I think, that's something that we've had this discussion before here on the podcast about kids finding the right place for them and not getting so caught up in what level of basketball it is, because when you're in high school, you have a tendency to get caught up, and everybody thinks,
sure.
And parents think, and just with the AAU system the way it is today, people think it's Division I or it's nothing, and if they don't get that scholarship offer, that their basketball career is over or it's been a waste. And we've talked to so many people, whether it's Division III coaches or NAI coaches or players who have played at that level, and everybody just to a person talks about just how good the experience was if they ended up in the right place for them. And I think that's something that if we could get that message across to high school players and parents, that, hey, anybody who wants you to come play for their college program, if they're recruiting you, if they're interested in you, you should be flattered by that. And
Absolutely.
And then you should look and find what's going to be the best fit for me academically and athletically. And it sounds like you were able to get that. And I've known Coach Hunt for a long, long time, and played against his son Casey, who was a year younger than me. So I've known their family for a long, long time. And Coach Hunt's a great guy, and I'm sure I know that if you had an opportunity to, spend your time there under him, that you could vouch for just what a good basketball mind he is, and then just what a good person he is as well.
He truly is. He was a guy, and I don't know. I think it's something I've always tried to emulate. Was I think he might have yelled twice in my time there, like really yelled. And one time was because I think guys took pillows from the hotel room and we got charged for it, like that. Like not being the smartest, but he didn't yell. But guys played so hard for him. He just had this. He commanded this respect and this admiration they had for him that you just didn't want to disappoint him. And to me, as a coach, if I can get guys to do that, not out of fear and not worried that they're going to get yelled at or that they're going to have to run, I think you just get so much more out of people. And he had a way of doing that I'm still trying to figure out, but it was pretty impressive to see. And then if you played with Casey, I know Casey came down a couple times and worked this out. And talk about guys that were skilled, man. He would put us through these drills and demonstrate them, and all the guards would look at each other like, we're supposed to do that? Like, how is he? And I actually played with his youngest son, Chad, who was just a stud, 6'6", 215, could shoot from 28 feet, dunk from the free throw line. We showed up on the same day and said, "Hey, what position you play?" And he said, "The 2 guard." I'm about 6'2", and I'm like, "Oh man, I'm like this."
Well, it's funny because I hadn't seen Chad in years and years and years, and when I was playing against Casey, Chad was just he was little, he was young, so I'm 49. Almost going on 50. So Chad was just a little kid back when I was, when I was playing against Casey in high school and in college. And then I saw Casey. He's now working for the Charlotte Hornets. He's their director of youth basketball. So I went to a junior NBA conference. I've been there now 3 years, I think. But the first year I went and saw Chad there and hadn't seen him probably for 25 or 30 years. So it was nice to kind of reunite and see him and. Again, good family and good basketball coaches all around. People that
for sure.
a basketball family without question. The Head Start Basketball Holiday Camp for boys and girls in grades 1 through 6 will be held on December 26th and 27th. Join us for 2 fun days of basketball fundamentals, contests, and small-sided games. You can find more information or get registered at headstartbasketball.com. Let's jump from playing to starting to think about coaching. Was coaching something that you knew you wanted to do from the time you were younger, or was it something that hit you in college? Did it hit you after you got done playing? You said, hey, I want to stay involved in the game. When did the idea of becoming a coach start to enter your mind?
I think it was always there. Both my parents were in the education field. My dad's a school psychologist. My mom's a special ed teacher. So kind of going into that education, coaching, it was just kind of a natural thought. I just figured that's it seems pretty easy. You get the summers off. I mean, little did I know, but summers off, weekends off, you get to coach. How great is this? You don't have to do anything so that was kind of always the thought that I had. And then, being in college and working different basketball camps and doing stuff like that, I really just enjoy teaching the game. Things always just kind of made sense to me on the basketball court. I think maybe because I wasn't as naturally athletic as some of these guys or stuff, and I had to figure out, okay, how do I do this move? And it just kind of, like I said, it made sense for me. I was able to piece it together and then relay that message to other people and figure that stuff out. So coaching was something I always wanted to get into. I was able to, once I was done playing, I got hurt and still had a little bit of school left, so I finished school and was able to go volunteer at Willoughby South High School and coach there, and 23 years old and was ready to roll and thought I knew everything and was ready to take the world over, and realized how little I did actually know about coaching. So
how long did it take you to realize you didn't know very much?
Probably. I thought I knew basketball because we go to the open gym and I'm killing guys because I'm a college guy and they're high school. I'm thinking this is gonna be easy. This is fun.
Right.
And then I think the first time I had to talk to a parent or the first time we had to do some type of paperwork thing, and I'm like, wait, there's not just basketball. Like there's organization to it. Guys have to get locks. They have to get lockers. We have to do uniforms. We have to do transportation. That was the part that just kind of blew my mind, was all the logistical stuff outside of the game of basketball that really showed me I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think that I've said before that when I think back to getting my first job as a coach, so my first, quote, real coaching job beyond just, working at camps and stuff while I was playing, was I was the JV coach at Bay when I was I think it was my second year. First year out of school, I volunteered at Strongsville as an assistant JV coach, but I don't really count that because I was just kind of along for the ride. I'm just sort of standing on the side. And then I got my first real job. I was the JV head coach at Bay, and I remember the first time I went into practice, and I'm standing there, and the 12 kids are in front of me, and we get started, and I've got some some drills and stuff, and of course you think you know it all, but basically all I had was the things that I had learned from the coaches that I played for. You know what I mean? I had nothing else. It was like, all right, we're gonna run a practice just like Strongsville did and just like Kent State did, and that's it. That's all I got, fellas. And
that's what.
And so you're running that first drill, and I just remember being one set of eyes and just looking and going, oh my God, there was just 5,000 things that they did wrong in that first 5 minutes. How am I possibly ever going to fix and correct and do all these things? And I just remember that just being overwhelmed. And so I guess as it went on, I still felt like I know what I'm doing, and I'll figure it out and whatever. And now I look back on that and I'm like, I really wasn't a very good coach at that point. And slowly over time, I think you come to realize that there's so much out there for you to know. No matter how much you know, there's always more that you can figure out and find out. So that's one piece of it. And then I think the other part of it, number two, is that you don't realize, especially as a young kid, you don't realize how much time other coaches are putting into everything that goes into building a great program and what it takes. So we can get into that in a little bit when we talk about your high school experience and just the amount of time that it takes to build, whether it's a college program or whether it's a high school program. The amount of time it takes to do that right, especially nowadays, is just it's immense. And I don't think I realized that when I was younger.
No, that's the thing. As a player, you go to practice, you do what you're asked to do. Maybe stick around and get some shots up afterwards, and then you're gone, and you probably don't think about it the rest of the time. And then, as a coach, you spent hours planning that practice, down to the details, and then afterwards you spend hours just critiquing it and thinking about everything that went right and went wrong, and I should have done this, and this kid did this, and should I have let him get away with that, or do I need to correct it, or I should have, and it's a never-ending process. My wife always used to laugh, like we'd stay after practice, and as the coaching staff talk for an hour sometimes, and you just get lost in it.
Yep.
Like, you just did this. Like, why are you talking? Like, you're just here for 2.5 hours. Why do you have to stay for another hour? And you just don't even realize it. But, to do this or to do what, any of us do, or any of these guys have been on your podcast, and you have to be a little bit crazy. You have to be obsessed with it, because especially at the high school level or at the junior college level, none of us are in this for the money. I mean, it's just not the amount of, if you broke it down what you make hourly, it's pretty disgusting.
Yeah, it's pretty bleak. That's a number that no coach wants to see.
No, not at all.
And you especially don't want your wife to see it if you're married.
Oh God, no. That's. I guess the other part, I didn't realize. Growing up, I just assumed, I don't know, coaches probably made a bunch of money. You guys in the NBA make a couple million. College coach, a couple $100,000. Like, I'm sure a high school coach does pretty well. And then you see it, and you're like, oh man, that's okay. That's not exactly what I was thinking.
No, not at all. And I think that's one of the things too, that as players and the parents of players, thinking about kids who are coming up from third grade on up through high school, I don't think people have an understanding of what the reality of the coaching profession is, because mostly what they see is what you just described. You see the NBA coach who has a $6 million salary. You see John Calipari at Kentucky who makes whatever he makes, $5 million a year. And you see, those are the big names that you see on TV. Those are the people that get talked about. But the real stories are the guys who are working and building great programs at the high school level, who are, again, making peanuts. And then for the guys who are in college coaching, the vast, vast, vast majority, as I'm sure you can attest to, are guys who are working really, really hard, working tons and tons of hours, making very little money. And in some cases, people who are trying to break into the level above where they are now, in some cases volunteering themselves and making not just little money, but no money. And just to be able to get their foot in the door, to be able to get it started. And I don't think the general public really understands that piece of coaching, because they only see the glamour coaches. They don't see how even on a Division I staff, when you have, a staff of 6 or 7 or 8 guys, you get down to guys 7 or 8, and those guys aren't making any money, and they're working awfully hard at what they do. And I think it's I'm sure you can attest to it. It's a tough lifestyle, especially if you're not just a single person.
For sure, and that was a huge, being at South and being so I went from volunteering to the next year being hired to teach there, became the varsity assistant, and again thought I was on top of the world. I think I was gonna make like $3,000 for doing that. Man, this is great. But again, having just getting married, having no kids. My wife's working, I'm working. She didn't care when I was gone. A kid would call me or text me and say, "Hey, it's Friday at 7. Can we get in the gym and do some work?" Sure. It's Sunday morning. Can we get in the gym and do some work? Absolutely. And having all that free time was great. Now still having a wife, for some reason she's still with me, even though I spend all these hours away. And having a 5-year-old daughter and having other responsibilities, it does become, you have to be a little bit more precious with your time. So as you get older and you add these responsibilities, my love of basketball isn't any different. I've just added other things that I really care about and love that. So you have to be smart with it and figure out how I'm going to be able to, there's only so many hours in the day. So how can I give each of those appropriately?
Yeah, for sure. What you said earlier about sitting in the coach's office for an hour or two after practice was over or after a game completely resonated with me, because while I was at Richmond Heights, I think back to when we first started. So I got there, I was 25 my first year, and Phil Schmuck, who was the coach at that point, was
Schmuck, good guy, yeah.
Phil was like 32, and then Jason Pop he might have been 22 maybe at that point. And so we would literally, we'd have like a 3.5 hour practice, and then I had nowhere to go, and Jason had nowhere to go, and Phil was just a junkie. So we'd sit in the coach's office literally after having just practiced for 3.5 hours, and we'd be in the coach's office for another hour and a half, where the game would end. We'd have a game on Friday night, and it'd be midnight. We'd still be sitting in the coach's office just talking. You didn't think anything of it at that time, because as you said, you had no other responsibilities. And that's probably one of the thing that I miss the most about not being a high school coach, is those conversations in the locker room. Those can never be replaced. And in essence, I feel like this podcast has in a lot of ways replaced that post-game coach's office talk for me.
Yeah,
because
that makes sense.
Yeah, because you just don't get that same ability to rehash everything and talk it through and just talk hoops with a bunch of guys who are as passionate about it as you are. So I could totally relate to that sentiment for sure.
No, it's amazing too with some of those conversations how you can go from starting and thinking you are the worst team in the world and I don't know how we're ever going to win a game, to we're pretty good, back to we're the worst team in the world. This kid is number 1 on your depth chart, to someone brings something up. It's just, like I said, in a matter of an hour, the way your opinion goes up and down, it changes and sways, and it's just it is a special thing that you kind of have to be, like I said, a little bit crazy to do. But if you are and you have that gene in you, then there's nowhere else you'd rather be.
I agree. All right, talk a little bit about when you were an assistant. Talk about what you feel you learned as an assistant coach that eventually helped you when you took over a head job, and then B, give us some things that through the course of your experience, things that you think make for a good assistant coach. So if any assistant coaches are out there listening, what are some things that good assistants in your mind do to help their program and help their head coach to succeed?
Yeah, I think, well, number one, having been in both roles, it's important to kind of know what your head coach expects of you and what your head coach wants. I've been in spots where it's the head coach likes to do most of the coaching and talking and do all this stuff, and then I'll jump in and add something here or there. And I've been in other spots, where I'm at now, where they say, all right, hey, you got the defense. Let's go put the whole thing in, and you're responsible for that. So I think at the high school level, I definitely learned just pick your spots. Be a counterbalance to your coach. If you have a coach that likes to, I guess, yell or get into people or do things like that, maybe be the guy that goes up to someone afterwards and say, hey, fine, here's what he meant. Just kind of rephrase what the coach said. You have a coach that's a little bit more relaxed. Maybe you could be the guy that's the stickler on the drill. Make sure everyone's foot hits the exact right spot. Make sure everyone's doing this part just right. Because I think if you have the same voice coming from every coach and the staff, the exact same voice, it kind of tends to cancel each other out. So to have a little bit of that, you want to have the same message, but maybe a different way of communicating that message to the players. So I think that was the main one. As far as assistants go, there is a huge difference, and I forgot this even in a couple years ago, but from the first seat to the second seat, there's a huge difference. As an assistant, you are focused on 1, 2, maybe 3 things, or a couple of players, or hey, we want to get this play that I put in, or I scouted this one thing. As a head coach, you have an entire program that you're thinking about. And each decision you make, there are 50 other things going on into it, because you want to play this kid because he actually did really well on some tests in school and he's been working hard and he deserves it. But this kid shouldn't play because you heard from his parents that he did something, but you don't relay that to all the assistants. So you're just trying to, you have to remember that as an assistant, that you can offer the suggestion, support it with why you believe in that. But then at the end of the day, kind of just got to go along with what the head guy says, because no one writes articles in the paper about how the assistant coach made a mistake and should have ran this defense or should have called this player, shouldn't have played that guy. It kind of, at the end of the day, you get the responsibility as the head person. So it's just a different feeling.
Yeah, I think that's a huge, huge point that you just made, and I love it. And that is that, one, you make those suggestions, and I think that a good head coach makes their assistants feel valued in
For sure.
bringing those suggestions to them. But then ultimately, I think one of the key traits that I found as a longtime assistant coach was you have to learn very quickly not to take offense when your idea is ignored or shot down or just isn't put to use. Because I think, as you said, the head coach knows that the record is on their shoulders, and the spotlight is on them, and whatever decision ultimately gets made is not going to reflect on the assistant coach. It's going to reflect on the head coach. And so I think that that's something that the good assistant coaches that I've been around, and in my own experience, I just found that you have to be willing to give those suggestions and keep giving them, even if 99 in a row they get rejected. It might be that 100th suggestion that you come up with that your head coach says, oh yeah, that is a good idea, let's do that, and maybe it helps the program or helps the team win. And you can't take offense to those other 99 times where your idea was dismissed. You just have to keep plugging away at it. And I think if you have a good relationship with your head coach, and conversely as the head coach, if you have a good relationship with your assistant, I think that really provides a quality staff, as you said, a balance, a point counterpoint where everybody has input, and yet there's still a clear hierarchy of who's making those decisions.
For sure, and it's a huge difference just in the fact that the relationships with the players. As an assistant, I can kind of be the nice guy to a certain extent. It is a nice role to be in, where if the kid comes up to me and says, "Well, why aren't I playing?" or "I should have done this," I'll explain it to them and tell them why they're not and things like that. But at the end of the day, I go, well, it's not my decision exactly. Like I can point to it, or there's not as much responsibility. I don't know if it's the exact right word, but you don't have to. You get a little bit of deniability in it, and
right, for sure.
And that's the truth. I'm being honest. It just makes your life just a little bit easier. It's not quite as heavy on your shoulder. It's still heavy. You still care. You still want to win. You're giving everything you can. And you're not throwing your head coach under the bus. But it's just, like I said, something about that one chair. They're set up about 6 inches apart. But something about moving down that one chair changes everything.
I think it's a little easier to walk away from a loss as an assistant coach. And
absolutely.
And I think you described it well. I don't know if you can quantify that. I don't know if I can put that into words, but I just know that in situations, and even the levels that I've been a head coach at, I was a JV head coach, and then I've coached my own kids in their rec and travel and AAU basketball. And when I'm the head coach, I take those losses way harder than I do when I'm an assistant coach, because as a head coach, you feel that responsibility for the performance of your team. When you're an assistant coach, there's some small piece of you that says, well, it's on the head coach.
For sure, no, completely. And I know I'm sure Coach Bo, who's at Lakeland, will probably listen to this at some point. It's not, this is nothing against, but that is true, because you think, well, maybe I might have done this differently, or I might have done that different, and that's nothing against. And I'm sure my assistants that were under me felt the exact same way. And it's not, we're all in it together. We're all on the same staff, and we all have the same goal, and we're following it. But yeah, you see, there is just something where you can kind of say, all right, well, you're still upset and you still want to win, but there is just a different. It's not quite a sickening. It's not a sickening of a feeling. I actually talked to Matt Duffy, who's the football coach at South. He teaches next to me. We were talking. They have a big game on Friday to try and make the playoffs, and we were talking about it. And I said, hey, when you win, are you excited? And he said, no, just kind of relieved. And I said, I know I'm the same way, but like, if you lose, you're sick, and if you win, you're just relieved. You're not even. But now when you're a player, when you win, you're ecstatic, and when you lose, you go, we'll get the next one. Like, it's a crazy feeling when you switch role. Like, all the different roles that are part of a team take wins and losses just slightly different.
For sure, and I think that you as an individual, it becomes a challenge when the people around you don't have the same reaction to winning and losing, or the same style of reacting to winning and losing as you do. I know that was one of the things that, as a player, I would take losses really, really hard. And I oftentimes ask people, do you love to win or do you hate to lose? And I always answer that question by saying, I hated to lose. I mean, I like to win. You might even say I love to win, but if you ask me which of those two emotions was stronger, I hated to lose. So the idea of losing a game and then getting on the bus and talking and giggling and laughing was completely foreign to me as a player. And so then when you have teams where the kids can do that, you're just like, whoa, do you guys care? And everybody, again, you have to remember, and it's something that I think you learn with experience, is that everybody's different. And I've often said that, it's probably not healthy to have a bus full of kids that are crying and punching the seat in front of them after they lose. That's not a healthy way of going about dealing with a loss either. So everybody has their own way of doing it. But as a coach, I think, have to understand how different people react and how different people look at wins and losses. And like for me, like I said, I would describe myself as hating to lose, but I know there are people out there that have a different way of that manifests itself differently in different people.
For sure. And I think that's why if you talk to most people that are heavily involved in basketball and are still doing it and aren't doing it obviously just because they're making millions of dollars, they're going to have that same philosophy of absolutely hating to lose. I don't think you get this far in the business in coaching by just going, it's kind of fun. I hope we win. I hope you have to have that little switch that you cannot stand to lose, that you are. I have to wake up in the morning after a loss and be physically ill and be, why do I feel like? And it's a weird thing. Someone told me once, like, if your happiness is dependent on 16, 17-year-old and 18-year-old boys, like, you're in for a long, long life. It's very true, and I remind myself of that all the time. I still get very upset or become crazy because of it. So it's I get what that person was saying, and they were completely right, but it doesn't matter.
Right. It doesn't change that feeling of getting up the next day and I guess
the first thing you think,
right.
Like, I can't believe we lost last night. I can't. How did that happen? Yeah,
I remember more, and now this reference seems more dated than it ever has. But I remember as a player, and then early in my coaching career, when you would lose, I didn't want to see the newspaper the next day. I did not want to get up.
You don't want to check the Twitter mentions nowadays.
Right now I don't want to check social media. But at the time, I did not want to get up and see that we lost in the newspaper the next day. And even walking around school, both as a player and as a coach, you're just like, ugh, I don't even want to show my face after having lost that game last night. And it's just, again, I think if you're a competitive person, and I think if it means something to you, then I think those are the reactions are completely normal for anyone who's competitive. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy, but I think it's normal. I definitely think it's a normal feeling.
No, like you said, going to school the next day, I used to just think, like, man, this is gonna be horrible. They're all looking. No one cared.
So
no
true.
one really.
So true.
You know what I mean? It's looking back, like no one. But I thought, man, everyone's looking at me. They're gonna think that we lost because of me, or we did this, or I called the wrong thing, or no one. They're worried about their own thing. But to me, it was the most important thing. So it is kind of funny to see it like that.
Yeah, it was life and death early in, especially for me as a player, and then early in my coaching career. I mean, I took that stuff super hard before you kind of learned how to deal with it and manage your emotions and figure it all out. And I think that you come to a healthier place where you're just as competitive, but you understand how to deal with it, because as you mentioned earlier, now you have a family, now you have kids, you have other things that you have to do in your life, and you have to be able to compartmentalize that to some degree so that you can continue to go forward and be a productive person in other areas of your life. All right, so talk about your transition from being an assistant to getting your first opportunity to be a head coach at the high school level. Talk about first how that opportunity came to be, and then two, talk a little bit about what that transition was like to go from being an assistant coach and moving over that one chair like we described.
Yeah, so I'd been at South for I think 2 or 3 years total, 1 year volunteering, 2 coaching, and I was 26, 27, and like I said, I knew everything at that time. I was ready to go win a couple state titles and then maybe move on to Duke and help out there or anything like that. So like I said, I just needed an opportunity. So I'd actually interviewed at a couple different places when things came up, and was always told, you're going to be really good. You just got to get some experience first. You got to get more experience. And the old classic, well, how do I get experience if no one's going to give it to me? So finally, Geneva High School, who was in our premier athletic conference at the time, had a job opening, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go talk to them, and was offered the job. And they had struggled. There was a time kind of in the early 2000s when they were pretty good. They had open enrollment. They were winning some district titles. And then in the previous years, I think the previous 3 years, they'd won, I think, 5 games total. But after I just wanted my own program. I just wanted. I thought I had all the answers. I thought I knew everything. I was going to change the way people did this. So I took the job. I was still teaching at Willoughby South High School. I was getting my master's degree in coaching and athletic administration, and my wife was pregnant. And I thought, what would be a good idea to drive 45 minutes to Geneva every day after I back to take over a program that won 1 game the year before, and it was great. And just to show you how important it was, I think I was 2 weeks into the job. I'd already taken it, and the principal asked me, how much is your contract? And I said, you know what, I never even asked. I don't know how much I'm getting paid, which is funny now, kind of dumb on my part at the time, but I was willing to do whatever I had to do to get there. And just going there, I had every idea in the world. I'd read every book. I was ready to go. We were going to change the culture there. We were gonna win. I remember, the first day having the guys say, "Hey, we're gonna practice cutting down nets. We're gonna be cutting down nets this year when we win a championship, and we're gonna be doing all this stuff." And I had everything like that. We won 1 game that year.
Did you cut down the net after that victory?
We should have. It was an away game at Kadiop. Man, looking back, we should have. And I think it was like the 13th or 14th game. But I'll be honest, I think that might have been one of my favorite years ever coaching, possibly the best job I ever did. I mean, to be fair, we probably could have won 3 or 4 games, but it's not like I had like the 86 Celtics and we were blowing games. The kids played really hard. We had developed kind of a culture and a program we wanted. In the next year, by having those guys again, we were able to win 9 games, which is the most they've won in a while. And I just think, to me, I learned it's not about, okay, I have great quick hitters that I stole from these people, or I'm going to do this on defense or do that. It was about, the long process of getting these guys in the gym and showing them how hard it is to win and how it doesn't just happen overnight. And you have to do all these little things. And like I said, changing the culture to, hey, we're happy that we lost by 10 to, no, that's not good enough. We have to do a little bit more. And in that 2 years that I was there and that process that happened was really, I learned a ton. It was, our goal was to be in games, and then to maybe beat some teams that we were supposed to beat, and then to win some games maybe we weren't supposed to win, and then to be considered, when we stepped on the court with people, we were considered equals. And I think my record at that time, if you look at it, it's kind of put a dent in my career win-loss record, but some of the stuff I accomplished there will be stuff I remember kind of forever. So
All right, so let me ask you this question, because I think this is something that a lot of coaches, especially young coaches, I think may struggle with. When you come into a program that has been a losing program, and you want to come in and you want to change the culture, and it obviously doesn't happen overnight, and you want to sell that culture building stuff, and that's easy to do in your first year when you're 0-0.
Yes,
and
everyone loved me then.
Right,
That was
and
great.
you come in, you're like, hey, I got all these great things. We're cutting down the nets. We're doing X, Y, and Z. This is the type of team we're going to be. And then all of a sudden it's January and you're 1-12.
Yeah.
So if you think back to that, like, do you have any advice for a coach who may be in that similar situation, who's trying to change the culture at a losing program and has great ideas, has a vision of what they want to do, but the challenge is that when you're not putting wins behind that vision, it becomes difficult to sell it to your kids, to the parents, to administration, the greater community. So any advice for anybody who's in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, you really have to focus on the process. You know, and process-oriented is a coach term that everyone likes to use, but that has to be it. And you have to find other ways to measure success and measure growth. You know, we used to break down, hey, we're going to play for 3 minutes, and I'm going to call a timeout, and we're going to see what the score is. And we need to win these 3 minutes. And you know, we would do that, and that would be a win for us, you know, and then we got to win the next 3 minutes. So find other little ways to get success, even if at the end of the day it's not. And then it's this fine line of, you know, we were going to be coming in there, and Geneva was notorious for, you know, Coach Ellis was a great coach, and they ran the Princeton offense, and they did all this stuff. And I thought, no, we're going fast. We want to play fast, and we want to do this, and this is the only way we're doing it. And you know, I was set on, you know, we're playing fast. This is it. We're going to teach these guys. And to be honest, I think the next year I realized there's probably a combination of both, where we got to teach these guys how to play basketball. So there are times to play fast, and there's times where we have to come down and really execute and run a set, and there's no shot clock, and we're going to really, you know, negate this athleticism advantage or size advantage of the other team. So you have to be firm in your beliefs, but you also have to be willing to take an honest look in the mirror and realize, you know, okay, just because I thought this was the right thing and I've been planning for this for 2 or 3 years, it doesn't necessarily mean it fits in this exact situation. So it's tough, and you just have to be consistent. You can't have a message one day and it didn't work. It's like a free throw routine. Like, you can't have a free throw routine and then you miss 2 or 3 free throws in a row and go, that's it, I'm changing my free throw routine. And then you make 3 and you keep it, and you miss 2 or 3 and you change it again. You have to be consistent with it and kind of let it work over time.
I love that. I think it's key, and I know I've been guilty of that in the past, and not just in situations necessarily where we're losing, but I'll have something in mind, whether I see it, you know, I'll see something on YouTube, or I'll go to a clinic and I'll hear about it, or I'll read something in a book. I'll be like, oh yeah, I really want to institute that. I want to make that a part of my program. Or I'll see a new drill, something that tweaks something maybe I've already done. I'm like, yeah, that is something that I want to make sure I do. And I'll do it for a day, or I'll do it for 2 days, or I'll do it for a week. And then at some point I lose my focus, and that thing that was so exciting a week ago or 2 weeks ago has suddenly disappeared. And I think that's something that it's very challenging as a coach, and I think especially as you're a young coach and you're an inexperienced coach, to just chase that newest thing that you find. And
for sure,
as you said, the key is to think about what it is that you want to do from a culture standpoint. And you can maybe extend that to X's and O's to a certain degree. Obviously, good coaches are going to adapt whatever their core philosophy is, X and O wise, to their personnel and try to make that fit their personnel. But from a culture standpoint, the things that are going to be the pillars of your program, I think you really have to figure out what that looks like, and then make a complete commitment to making sure that those things happen every single day, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's on the practice floor, at the game, on the bus, out in public, wherever it is that you and your team are representative of your school. And that's sometimes, especially when you're losing, it's hard to do, because
Absolutely.
You know, you look at it and you say, oh, you know, we just lost 5 in a row. We got to change something up and do something different. But I think you have to go back to where you were when you were 0-0 and say, okay, are the reasons why I wanted to do these things as part of my culture, are those reasons still valid? And if they're still valid, then you got to stick with them. And as you said, that's sometimes difficult to do. So I think that's a great piece of advice that you just shared there, Matt, for sure.
No, good. Yeah, no, absolutely. It is. Things look better when they're successful. You know, I've run some of the same stuff. Not everything, but you know, you have a couple of pet plays that you run, and man, they look really good now when I have college athletes running them as opposed to when our center was 5'10" at the most. You know, and then worked his butt off, but you know, that backdoor lob play I put in for him wasn't great. You know, now that I have a 6'8" guy that can go to the top of the backboard to get it, it looks a lot better. So you just have, you have to know exactly who you're coaching and what you can get out of it. And I really like your point too of just being consistent with it and what are the main things that you're going to focus on. And I think, you know, as a young coach, sometimes you come in and we all have our notebooks of the clinics and we watch all the videos and we're ready to go and we have 10 million things, and then you just touch on one thing here and one thing here and one thing here and one thing, and you have to figure out what are your core values and what are your core things. You know, not only just culturally, but on the court. What are the things that, you know, everyone wants to be good at everything, but what are the things we're really going to focus on and we're going to be solid in these areas, and just every day you have to do that. And I think Brad Stevens I saw speak at a clinic in Cleveland. This is back when he was at Butler. No one knew who he was. He gave out his cell phone number. That shows you how long ago it was. And I tried it a couple years later. It was not still the same number. You know, he said the things that get measured get repeated. You know, and get like, so when you keep track of something or every day you're doing a drill where you're measuring it, those are the things that the kids know are important, and they're going to make sure that if you emphasize it, they're going to emphasize it too. So figure out, you know, to each coach what those things are that they really think these are our non-negotiables, that we are going to be good at these 3 or 4 things. And hopefully we're good at other stuff too, but these 3 or 4 things we know no matter what, we're going to show up and we're going to be good at those.
Yeah, that focus is really, really important. We talked to John Baines, who's the head coach at Elmhurst College up near Chicago, and one of the things John said that he did is before the season, he would ask his assistants and his players to write down 10 things that they thought they needed to do this year to be successful. And then he would say, okay, now take away half of them. Okay, so now you're down to 5. He'd say, okay, now take away 3 more. All right, so now you're down to 2. And then he would collect those cards and he would look at those 2 things and kind of take that as input for what are the most important things that our team needs to do or his team would need to do in that particular season to be successful. And not that he just took a poll and took whatever they did, but just kind of like what we talked about before, he's collecting information from people who are invested in the program. And then I think the greater point here as it relates to what we're talking about is he put a focus on 2 things. Like, these are the 2 things that all year long I think we need to do in order to be able to have a successful season. And so every day in practice, we're going to talk about these things. Every day pregame, we're going to talk about these things. When we have a team meeting, we're going to talk about these 2 things. And so the players are going to know over and over again, as you said, what gets measured gets repeated. And so the kids on his team, his coaches knew that these are the things that we need to do in order to have a successful season. As a result, he said it helped to keep him focused on what he was doing. And so I think that was something that as a coach, I think that's a good activity that you could do with your team, especially if you're a high school coach beforehand, before your season, and get an idea of what are some of the things that your team feels like they need to focus on, and then you can use their input to kind of pare down what you feel is important, and then that can help you to keep that focus that we've been talking about.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal idea. I'm like everything else I've done in basketball, I'm stealing that.
As you've listened to the Hoopheads podcast, one common topic that continually comes up in our conversations is character. I'm fortunate to be associated with the Positive Coaching Alliance, a national nonprofit movement that provides valuable tools, training, and resources for coaches, athletes, parents, and administrators that is centered around sports and educational psychology and organizational behavior research. PCA combines this research with practical advice from a national advisory board of top pro and college athletes and coaches who utilize PCA principles at the highest levels of competition. Through a partnership with our local Cleveland chapter of the PCA, we are pleased to offer a discount code to allow you, our listeners, to take a PCA online course for just $20. To take advantage of this offer, Visit the store on positivecoach.org and enter the discount code HoopHeads20. That's HoopHeads20 with 2 capital H's. Coaches, I hope you'll take advantage of this great offer from the Positive Coaching Alliance and help us continue to grow the game.
One of the other things, just speaking of that I did early on, that maybe another, it was an interesting thing for me, and I stole it from somebody else, but gave out note cards to guys and said, okay, I need you to put down, we're not putting names on it, we're going to collect them as random. I want you to put down how many minutes a game you think you should play and how many shots a game you think you should get. Just on a blank note card, and we collected them, and I added them up, and to no one's surprise, games would have had to have been like 200 to get there, and we would have had to take like 500 and some shots a game.
Right.
But it's just kind of an interesting exercise for guys to see, like, oh, okay, you're right. There's not everyone's going to get 12 to 15 shots a game. Like, it's just not going to happen. Not everyone's going to play, 20 minutes or 25 minutes a game. So it's just, like you said, you let the players, you empower them a little bit to, hey, I'm interested in your opinion. What do you think? But then it also kind of shows them the reality of there's only so many shots and only so many minutes to go around. So, you have to really earn them.
Yeah, I think anything that you can do where you're soliciting input from people who are stakeholders in your team, whether that's players or assistant coaches, I think that you end up, especially if you built a culture of trust and honesty, where people feel like they can share things and be honest and without fear of there being repercussions, or just, again, if you've built a good relationship with the people who are part of your program, then when you do something like those 2 activities that we just described, you're going to get honest feedback that can help make you a better coach and help dial in your focus on what it is that you need to do, and then also gives you kind of a window into the way that your team thinks and the way your individual kids are thinking. And that can also give you some guidance as far as, okay, this kid thinks he's going to get 25 shots a game.
Yeah.
I got to start having these conversations to bring him down so he understands that he's an important part of the team, but I need him to defend and rebound, and he might get 4 shots a game, and I got to get him to accept that role. And you might not understand that fully until you go through a week or 2 of practice, and by then, now the kid's already disgruntled because you haven't recognized it early enough. So I think getting that information as early as possible is a great tool for coaches to be able to help their team be successful over the course of a season. For sure,
yeah. The more, as you said, stakeholders, the more input those players and coaches feel like they have, I think the more they'll buy in. We use Coach K's philosophy, which she used with the gold medal teams that he won, was, he doesn't have rules, he has standards, and he lets the players come up with the standards. Now, I'll put them in the locker room and say, hey, let's come up with what's important to you guys. And obviously I'll kind of guide and shape those to make sure they fit, but I think if the players come up with it, and they do a pretty good job of it for the most part, they feel a little bit more important, a little bit more importance to buy into it and really enforce it. And we leave them up in the locker room, and they really kind of, hey, that was my rule. I got to make sure that this happens. That was my standard. I have to make sure that they do this. And it's good. And they can kind of have some, we'll tell them, if this doesn't get uncomfortable in here a little bit, then nothing was accomplished. Because if you just stay in your comfort zone and no one wants to speak out or say anything, then nothing's going to change. So have those kind of awkward conversations now, and then when we step on the court and we're in between the lines, we're all together. But now's the time to have those and figure out what we need to do to be successful. And if they have a say in it, and it's not just me going, here's my rules and this is how we do stuff, I feel like they really tend to buy in a little bit more.
Yeah, that buy-in is key. I don't think there's any doubt about that. When the days of the dictator on high coach, just pontificating from up on a hill down towards the players, I think those days are pretty much over, and for good reason. And I think you said it right off the top when you talked about Coach Hunt and how he did things. And you don't have to yell and scream to get results. You can coach by having respect for the players, and you can coach by explaining and by coaching positively. And I think that's something that, not that it wasn't around, because there were plenty of coaches who coached positively 20 or 30 years ago, but there certainly is a lot more people who are coming from that philosophy today, just as we learn more and more about it from a scientific standpoint, and more research is done about just how getting people to do things out of fear is not the best way to coax out the best performance out of a player. And so it's good to see that as coaches, just as a profession in general, that we've started to trend towards positive coaching, and we've left that days of the dictatorial coach behind us. All right, let's jump to your next job at Kenston, where you had a program that maybe had a little bit more of a winning tradition when you got there. So talk a little bit about how the opportunity to go to Kenston presented itself, and then just spend a few minutes talking about your experience there.
For sure. So yeah, that was 2 years at Geneva. Had a nice year the second year. The Kenston job opened up, and Coach Jakacki had left and was going to Crestwood. So I went out and talked to those guys and was offered the job, and knew that they had a ton of success in the years past. They had been in the Chagrin Valley Conference. They were one of the bigger schools in that conference, and Coach Jakacki did an awesome job. I think they'd won 5 or 6 conference championships in a row, and would consistently win 18 or 19 games a year, and were really rolling. And then me, being the genius I am, took over when they went from being the biggest school in the conference to the second smallest school in the conference, and going from Division II to Division I. But it was an opportunity, I think, to I would be at Geneva, and I loved my time there, and it was great. But I would watch these, Garfield Heights play, and St. Ignatius and Mentor and all these guys, and think, I want to compete at the highest level possible with these guys. I want to go and walk into these gyms and know I have a legitimate chance to go and beat these teams, consistently. And so Kenston gave me that opportunity. Phenomenal program, and as you said, I took over a program that had a culture in place, and it had success and winning, and it was a completely different situation because now I'm 2 years in, so I definitely know what I'm doing. I know everything in coaching for sure now. I thought I did before, but now I really do. But just going over there, and Josh Jakacki and I are friends, and we know each other, and I respect everything he did, and he did